The genetic sequence, it's an exact match.
Are you absolutely certain about this data?
The scalpel-thin beam of a desk lamp cut across the laboratory table as Dr. Yoon's hands trembled over the printed results. She looked up and the color had drained from her face. "Mr. Kang," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "She's not who you think she is." Kang Min-jae did not move. He rarely did when the ground shifted beneath him. A lifetime of discipline had taught him that stillness was armor. But his jaw tightened, and the paper in Dr. Yoon's hand seemed to burn brighter than anything in the room. "Say it again," he said. "She's your blood, Mr. Kang. Your only living relative." His eyes, usually unreadable, flickered with something close to horror. 3 months earlier, none of this would have made sense. Naomi Carter stepped off the plane in Incheon carrying a suitcase held together with a broken zipper and a strap of duct tape. Atlanta was 11 time zones behind her now, along with the empty apartment, the funeral she couldn't afford to properly hold, and the last of her grandmother's savings, which had gone into this one-way ticket. She didn't speak much Korean. She didn't know anyone in Seoul. What she had was a silver pendant, half of an old photograph folded inside it, and a determination that bordered on recklessness. The employment agency placed her within a week, housekeeping staff for a private estate outside the city. The pay was absurd for domestic work, almost suspiciously high. She should have asked why. She didn't. "You don't know whose house this is?" the older maid, Sora, asked her on the first morning, eyebrows raised so high they nearly vanished into her hairline. "Should I?" Naomi asked. Sora glanced over her shoulder like the walls themselves might report her. "This is Kang Min-jae's house." The name meant nothing to Naomi. Sora's expression told her it should have. "He runs things," Sora said carefully. "Not the kind of things you ask questions about. No maid has lasted longer than 30 days here in 2 years. He doesn't yell. He doesn't threaten. He just looks at you and you're gone by morning. Then I'll be careful not to be looked at," Naomi said. Sora didn't laugh. Kang Min-jae's mansion was a monument to controlled silence. Every hallway gleamed. Every servant moved like they were defusing something. Naomi had expected menace, something loud and cruel. Instead, she found a kind of grief dressed up as order, as if the entire house was holding its breath. She saw him for the first time at the top of the grand staircase. Tall, composed, dressed like a man who had never once been late to anything in his life. He didn't acknowledge the staff lined up below him. His eyes moved over them like they were furniture, until they reached her. For exactly 2 seconds his gaze held. Naomi didn't look away, not out of boldness, but because she hadn't been told the rule yet. By the time Sora hissed at her to bow her head, it was too late. That evening during dinner service, Naomi's hand shook as she poured water into his glass, and a single drop splashed onto the white tablecloth. The room went silent. A senior housekeeper stepped forward immediately, already reaching to send her away. "She stays," Min-jae said. 2 words. The room exhaled like it had been slapped. Later, in the servants' quarters, Sora stared at Naomi like she'd grown a second head. Nobody survives a mistake like that. Nobody. "Maybe he just wasn't in the mood to fire anyone today," Naomi said, though even she didn't believe it. The days that followed proved her wrong. Min-jae began finding reasons to have her nearby. She was assigned to clean the library, where he worked late into the night. She was assigned to serve his tea, though he had a designated tea attendant for exactly that purpose. She was assigned to organize his late mother's belongings, a task so intimate that even senior staff whispered about it in the halls. "He's never let anyone touch his mother's things," Sora told her, eyes wide. "Never." Naomi didn't understand it either. She wasn't trying to be noticed. She wanted to earn enough to survive, save what she could, and quietly chase the one thread she'd crossed an ocean for, her grandmother's fractured memories of a life in Korea she'd never fully explained before she died. The pendant never left Naomi's neck. Inside it, torn along a jagged edge, was half of an old photograph. A young woman's face, soft-eyed, unmistakably lonely. One evening, while she organized a drawer of preserved letters, Min-jae entered the library unannounced. She startled, nearly dropping a stack of papers. His eyes weren't on the papers. They were on the pendant, now visible where her collar had shifted. "Where did you get that?" he asked. His voice had changed, quieter, tighter, like something had reached into his chest and squeezed. "It was my grandmother's," Naomi said. "I don't actually know who's in the photo. She never told me before she passed." Min-jae said nothing. But something in his face had gone very still, very pale. He left without another word. That night, in the privacy of his study, he opened a small drawer, retrieved a photograph, and studied it beside a secretly taken picture of Naomi's pendant on his phone. The woman in his mother's old photo, the one buried in a box he hadn't opened in over a decade, had the same eyes, the same face, the same aching sadness. He said nothing to anyone. But from that moment on, Min-jae began watching Naomi Carter the way a man watches a ghost he isn't sure is real. The mansion never slept easily, but that night it turned violently awake. The first sign was the lights, every hallway plunging into blackness at once, as if the entire estate had been swallowed. Then came the sound of glass breaking somewhere near the east wing, followed by footsteps that didn't belong to staff. Naomi bolted upright in her narrow bed, heart hammering. Sora was already at the door, whispering, "Stay down, stay down." But Naomi's instincts, sharpened by a childhood of her grandmother's strange warnings, pulled her the opposite direction. She crept toward the corridor, pressing herself against the wall the way she'd been taught without ever knowing why. Shapes moved in the dark, 4, maybe 5 men dressed in black, weapons drawn, moving with the precision of people who had done this before. They weren't heading for the valuables. They were heading for Min-jae's private wing. Naomi's eyes lifted instinctively, scanning upward. A 6th man was crouched above the hallway, balanced on a support beam, waiting. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, worn smooth from repetition. "If men ever surround you, always look up first. Look up," Naomi screamed, loud enough to shake the whole corridor. "Above you, he's above you." Chaos erupted. Min-jae, who had emerged from his study at the first crash of glass, twisted just as the man above him dropped down, blade flashing. Min-jae sidestepped, driving his elbow into the attacker's ribs, sending him crashing into a display cabinet. Guards flooded the hallway. Shots were fired. Bodies collided in the dark. Within minutes, the intruders were subdued or fled through a shattered window into the night. When the lights finally surged back on, Min-jae stood breathing hard, blood trickling from a shallow cut above his eyebrow, staring at Naomi like he was seeing her for the first time. "You knew he was there," he said. "How?" Naomi's hands were still shaking. "I don't know. It's something my grandmother used to say." "Say it exactly." "If men ever surround you, always look up first." Naomi swallowed. She said it so many times growing up, I never questioned it. I just reacted. Min-jae's expression cracked just barely. A flicker of memory breaking through decades of discipline. His own mother used to whisper those exact words to him as a child, tucking him into bed during years when danger slept just outside their door. "Where is your grandmother from?" he asked, voice low. "I don't know. She never told me. She barely talked about Korea at all." Naomi hesitated. "That's actually why I came here. I wanted to find out." Min-jae said nothing, but something in him had already decided. The next morning before Naomi woke, a private courier arrived at a discreet laboratory across the city, carrying a sealed envelope containing a single strand of dark hair collected from her hairbrush without her knowledge. 3 days of silence followed. Naomi noticed dark circles forming under Min-jae's eyes, noticed him watching her from across rooms with something unreadable simmering behind his composure. The staff noticed too. "He's obsessed with you," Sora murmured one evening, folding linens with unusual urgency. "Everyone's saying it. The boss is Maid. People are jealous. People are scared for you." "It's not what you think," Naomi said, though she wasn't entirely sure what it was. On the 4th day, Dr. Yoon called. Min-jae took the call in his study, door locked, staff dismissed. When he emerged an hour later, his face was the color of ash. He found Naomi in the garden, kneeling beside the flower bed she'd taken to tending in her spare time, one of the few peaceful habits she'd built since arriving. "I need to speak with you," he said. "Now." She rose, wiping soil from her hands, unsettled by the rawness in his voice. He led her to the study, where the printed lab results sat waiting on his desk like something radioactive. "I had your DNA tested," he said bluntly. Without your permission. I know that was wrong. But I had to know. Naomi's stomach dropped. Know what? He turned the paper toward her. You're my blood relative, he said. If you're loving this twist, smash that subscribe button now, the next reveal is even bigger. The report says you're my closest living relative in the world. Naomi laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. That's not possible. I'm from Atlanta. My grandmother never even mentioned Korea until... She stopped herself. Until she was dying, and even then barely. I ran it twice, Min-jae said. Same result both times. The room seemed to shrink around them. There has to be a mistake, Naomi whispered. I thought so too. Min-jae's voice was quieter now, almost fragile in a way she hadn't heard from him before. I need to speak to someone who might know the truth. Someone who's kept our family's secrets for 30 years. He picked up the phone and made a single call. Get Attorney Cho here immediately, he said. Tell him it's about my aunt. Naomi stared at him, the pendant suddenly heavy against her collarbone. Half a photograph pressing into her skin like it had been waiting her whole life for this moment. Your aunt? She asked. Min-jae looked at her the way a man looks at a door he isn't sure he wants to open. My father had a younger sister, he said. She disappeared before I was born. My family never spoke of her again. I always assumed she was dead. Naomi's hand rose slowly to the pendant at her throat. What if she wasn't? She asked. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. Outside, the wind moved through the garden Naomi had spent weeks tending, and somewhere across the estate, the old family lawyer was already in his car, driving toward a truth that had waited 30 years to surface. Attorney Cho arrived within the hour, his coat still damp from the rain, his face drawn with the particular exhaustion of a man who had carried a secret so long it had become part of his bones. He sat across from Min-jae and Naomi in the study, hands folded, eyes lingering on the pendant around Naomi's neck for a long moment before he finally spoke. I wondered if this day would ever come, he said quietly. Then it's true, Min-jae said. It wasn't a question. Cho nodded slowly. Your aunt, Kang Ji-soo, was your father's younger sister. 26 years ago, she was pregnant, unmarried, and terrified. The council at the time had decided that any child born outside sanctioned bloodlines was a threat to succession. They planned to eliminate her and the child before the birth. Naomi's breath caught. Your grandfather found out, Cho continued, looking at Min-jae now. He couldn't stop the order, but he could delay it. He gave her one night, a forged passport, and enough money to disappear. She fled to America, Atlanta specifically. She changed her name, cut every tie, and never came back. Carter, Naomi whispered. My grandmother's name was Carter. She wasn't your grandmother, Cho said gently. She was your mother, Naomi. The woman who raised you as her granddaughter was, in fact, your birth mother, hiding her true relationship to protect you from a past she never wanted to touch again. The words landed like a physical blow. Naomi sank into the nearest chair, the room tilting around her. That's not, she started then stopped. Pieces she'd never understood suddenly rearranged themselves. The evasiveness, the refusal to speak of Korea, the tears that came without explanation on certain nights, the way she flinched whenever Naomi asked about her father. She protected you the only way she knew how, Cho said. By burying the truth so deep even you couldn't find it. Min-jae had gone very still, staring at Naomi with an expression that had shifted entirely. The tension he'd carried for days, the strange pull he hadn't understood, suddenly resolving into something clearer and infinitely more complicated. I thought, he started, then shook his head, unwilling to finish the sentence aloud. Whatever confusion had been building in him over the past weeks, whatever unfamiliar warmth he'd mistaken for something else entirely, dissolved the instant the truth settled into place. What remained was simpler, steadier, the unmistakable pull of family. You're my cousin, he said instead, testing the word like it belonged to a language he was only just learning. Naomi looked up at him, eyes glassy. I came here looking for a photograph. I never expected. She gestured helplessly at the room, at him, at the entire unraveling world around her. Any of this. Cho cleared his throat, his expression darkening. There's something else you both need to hear. The old council members, the ones who ordered your mother's death all those years ago, some of them are still alive. Still influential. If they learn Naomi exists, they'll finish what they started, Min-jae said grimly. As if summoned by the thought itself, his phone buzzed. He answered, listened, and his face hardened into something Naomi hadn't seen before. Cold, controlled fury. They already know, he said after hanging up. Someone in this house has been talking. Cho stood immediately. Then we don't have much time. Within the hour, encrypted messages were intercepted by Min-jae's private security team. Fragments of a conversation among the estate's remaining council loyalists, men who had outlived their era but never relinquished their appetite for control. She's alive. Confirmed. The old bloodline is compromised. Kill her before sunrise. No exceptions. No survivors. Min-jae read the message twice, jaw tightening with each word. Naomi, watching his face, felt the floor drop out from beneath her all over again. They want me dead, she said, disbelief and terror tangled together in her voice. Not while I'm breathing, Min-jae said, and for the first time since she'd arrived at the estate, his voice carried something other than cold composure, something fierce, protective, unmistakably familial. He turned to his head of security. Lock down the estate. Trust no one outside this room until I say otherwise. Sir, that includes everyone, Min-jae said. I mean everyone. The night stretched taut with tension as guards were repositioned, exits sealed, and loyalty quietly, carefully questioned. Naomi sat wrapped in a blanket someone had given her, pendant clutched in her fist, trying to absorb the impossible turn her life had taken in the span of a single day. Mother into stranger, stranger into blood, safety into target. Why does anyone still care after all these years? She asked quietly. It was decades ago. Min-jae sat across from her, exhaustion finally cracking through his composure. Because bloodlines mean power here. And power is the one thing men like them can never let go of. No matter how much time has passed, no matter how much blood it costs. Naomi looked at the fractured photograph resting against her palm, half a face staring back at her, waiting decades to be made whole. I just wanted to know where I came from, she whispered. Now you know, Min-jae said. And now we protect it. Outside, the estate's guards moved through the darkness like shadows rearranging themselves, unaware that among them walked at least one traitor. Someone who had already made their choice, and was waiting only for the right moment to strike. Dawn hadn't yet broken when the betrayal revealed itself. A guard named Hansol, trusted for over a decade, slipped through a service corridor toward the wine cellar. The one blind spot Min-jae's security system had never fully covered. He carried a small device, its blinking light the only source of illumination in the darkness. He didn't make it 3 steps before Min-jae's voice cut through the shadows. Looking for something? Hansol froze. Slowly he turned, hand inching toward his weapon. Don't, Min-jae said. Armed men emerged from the darkness behind him, weapons already raised. You've served this family for 11 years. I'd like to know why you're selling us out now. Hansol's composure cracked. You don't understand what they offered me, what they threatened. My family. Whose orders? Min-jae demanded. Silence. Whose orders? Director Beck, Hansol finally said, voice breaking. He's been planning this for weeks. Ever since he learned about the girl. The name hit Min-jae like a blade between the ribs. Director Beck, the man who had raised him since childhood, who had guided him through every difficult decision since his parents' deaths, who he had trusted more than anyone alive. My mentor, Min-jae said quietly, the words tasting like ash. Naomi, watching from the doorway where she'd crept despite every instruction to stay hidden, saw something break behind Min-jae's eyes. Not weakness, but the particular devastation of realizing the architect of your entire life had been building a cage around you the whole time. He orchestrated everything, Hansol admitted, shame and fear warring across his face. Your parents' deaths. Your aunt's exile. All of it. He's the one who's kept the old order alive behind the scenes for 30 years. That morning, buried in a drawer of her late mother's belongings that Min-jae had finally allowed her to search through, Naomi found a small recording device wrapped in cloth, along with a note in handwriting she now recognized as her mother's. If you're hearing this, I didn't make it out. Everything you need is here. The recordings once played unraveled 3 decades of buried truth. Beck's voice, younger but unmistakable, ordering the deaths of Min-jae's parents to seize control during the family's most vulnerable moment. Naomi's mother's voice, terrified but resolute, documenting every detail she'd witnessed before fleeing. He announced a succession ceremony this morning, Min-jae said grimly, reading a message on his phone. Public. Every major family and ally invited. He's accelerating his plan. It's a trap, Naomi said. Yes, Min-jae agreed. For both of us. The ceremony hall glittered with false celebration. Hundreds of guests gathered beneath golden light, unaware they were witnessing the final act of a decades-long conspiracy. Beck stood at the podium, composed, gracious, every inch the loyal mentor preparing to hand power to his protégé. He hadn't expected Naomi to be standing beside Min-jae when the ceremony began. You brought her, Beck said, smile faltering only slightly. Bold. I thought everyone should meet my only living relative, Min-jae said evenly. Since you seem so interested in her. Something shifted in Beck's expression, calculation, then cold resolve. He gestured almost imperceptibly, and Naomi caught the movement of a man near the exit reaching beneath his jacket. But Min-jae had anticipated this. Now, he said quietly. Every screen in the hall flickered to life simultaneously, broadcasting Naomi's mother's recorded voice across the room. Beck's own words echoed through the speakers, 3 decades old but unmistakable, detailing murder, betrayal, and the systematic destruction of Min-jae's family. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Allies who had stood beside Beck for years stepped back, horror dawning on their faces. The assassin near the exit hesitated, weapon still hidden, uncertain now who he was even protecting. Lies, Beck said, but his voice had lost its authority. Fabrications. Your voice, director, Min-jae said, stepping forward. Your own words. 30 years of blood on your hands, and you nearly made me your final unknowing accomplice. Security guards loyal to the true family, not Beck's shadow network, moved through the crowd, weapons raised. Beck looked around at faces that had once bowed to him and now recoiled, and something in him finally collapsed. He didn't resist when they took him. Months later, the mansion looked different, not smaller but somehow lighter, as if decades of held breath had finally been released. The old criminal networks Beck had built were dismantled piece by piece, replaced by legitimate business ventures. Families harmed by the old order received quiet, careful restitution. Naomi had returned to Atlanta, though she visited Korea often now, no longer a stranger crossing an ocean in search of ghosts, but family returning home. On one such visit, she arrived at Min-jae's estate carrying a familiar tea tray, the ceramic cups clinking softly as she walked through the garden she'd once tended as staff. Min-jae looked up from his desk, a small smile breaking through his usual composure. You're still bringing me tea? Naomi laughed, setting the tray down, pouring 2 cups instead of 1. Not as your maid. She sat across from him, sliding the second cup toward herself. As your cousin. Between them, resting on the desk, sat a photograph fully restored. 2 torn halves joined seamlessly after decades apart. The woman's face finally whole, finally at peace. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe to Afrokorean Storyhouse channel, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear which moment hit you hardest.